Hi, I'm Nelly from International Business. Today I'm going to tell you the distinction between classical schools and Keynesian schools. Welcome to the Nelly's Economics Time. Okay, here we have 3 things to talk about. The first one is the broad category. Second, I will introduce 2 detailed discussions between classical schools and Keynesian schools. Lastly, we'll talk about how classical schools and Keynesian schools face with this COVID-19 situation using their theories. Okay, let's get started. In the classical schools, Adam Smith is the pioneer of classical economic theory. So here we have 5 points of the category. First one is the free market. The theory of classical economics is that free markets will regulate themselves if they are left alone. Markets will find their own level of equilibrium without interference by people or the government. Second, the supply will make the demand. In a classical economy, everyone is free to pursue their own self-interest in a market that is free and open to all competition. When people work at jobs making things, they get paid and use these wages to buy other products. In essence, workers create their own demand for goods and services. Third, the full employment. Classical economics have some concerns about unemployment, but are more worried about the price inflation. They see inflation as the biggest threat to a strong long-term growth of the economy. Classicists, they believe the economy will always seek a level of full employment. They think unemployment results from government interference in the free market or the existence of a monopoly in an industry. Fourth, the market equilibrium. Classical supporters want a market that is free to find its own levels of supply and demand. They believe that prices should fluctuate based on the wants of consumers. The market will adjust itself to any shortages and surpluses of products. The last one is the government role. Classical economics do not like government spending, and they especially don't like the government debt. They would prefer a balanced budget because they do not believe the economy benefits from higher government spending. Okay, so next. Here we come to the Keynesian schools. Okay, the first one is there is no free market in Keynesian schools. Keynesian advocates believe capitalism is a good system, but that it sometimes needs help. When times are good, people work, earn money, and spend it on things they want. The spending stimulates the economy and everything runs smoothly. But when the economy goes downhill, moods change. During tougher times, business start closing and firing their employees. People don't have money to spend, and they try to save what little they have left. When people quit spending, the economy loses momentum and spirals further down. Here, it's a time we need the government intervention. Keynesian theory says this is exactly when government intervention makes sense. If people aren't spending, then the government has to step in and fill the void. However, there is just one problem. The government doesn't have its own money. It has to take money away from the people and companies to spend it. Higher taxes for businesses take money away that could otherwise be spent on more investments to grow the company. Therefore, Keynesians are okay with government borrowing because they are convinced that government spending increases aggregate demand in the economy. And then we have the demand may supply. Keynesian schools argue the economy often produces less than its full potential, not because it was technically impossible to produce more with existing workers and machines, but because a lack of demand in the economy. Next, we have some detailed discussions about assumption on money neutrality. First, the classical schools. They believe that money has no effect on real variables. As we learned in the class, neutrality of money is the idea that a change only affects nominal variables in the economy, such as prices, wages, and exchange rates, with no effect on real variables like employment, real GDP, and real consumption. And it is related to the classical dichotomy. It implies that the central bank does not affect the real economy by creating money, for example, the number of jobs and the size of real GDP. Instead, any increase in the supply of money would be offset by a proportional rise in prices and wages. As for the Keynesian schools, they think money is not neutral. Increasing the nominal money supply will reduce the real interest rate. Investment demand will then increase, and national income and product expands. And the conclusion is that nowadays people are more believe in the Keynesian schools of there is no neutrality in money. Okay, the next detailed discussion is about the slope of long-run aggregate supply between classical schools and Keynesian schools. The classical view is that long-run aggregate supply is inelastic. The classical view suggests that real GDP is determined by supply-side factors. The level of investment, the level of capital, and the productivity of labor, etc. Classical economics suggests that in the long term, an increase in aggregate demand will just cause inflation and will not increase real GDP. But in the Keynesian view of long-run aggregate supply is different. They think that the economy can be below full capacity for various reasons. At the end, let's take a look of how these models used in the real world. Let's analyze the situation of COVID-19. Due to the quarantine lives, we cannot go out, so the consumption must go down. Same reason as for the investments and net exports are also affected by the pandemic. So, while these factors are falling down, the aggregate demand will shift to the left, and the real GDP will fall. Therefore, now government will do something to save our economy. Therefore, they might raise the government expenditures when we raise the G, and there is a chance that the aggregate demand can shift to the right again. So the economy will back to the norms. And there is another way to save the economy, is to increase our money supply. When the money supply is increased, it shifts to the right. So the interest rate in the vertical axis will go down. When the interest rates decrease, it will stimulate the investment. So when investment goes up, look to the left picture. The investment go up, the aggregate demand may have a chance to go back to the norms as well. Yes, so this is the situations now we have during this pandemic. Now, think of which school will use government policies like this. Of course, that is Keynesian schools, because classical schools is famous for its doing nothing for the free market. So, this is how this all models works in the real world. Okay, that's the end of Nelly's economics time. Hope you guys like my videos and thank you for watching. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.